Hello, my name is Jason Parker. I will be discussing Harry Markopolos, the Bernie Madoff whistleblower, and I will talk about how Harry Markopolos, his actions followed some of the steps that Trevino and Nelson outlined for whistleblowing. Harry Markopolos was an analyst for a Boston firm called Rampart Investment Management. He was assigned because of his math skills to study Bernie Madoff's investment scheme and see if he could replicate the returns that Bernie Madoff was getting. Harry Markopolos was an interesting guy, and he quickly found that Bernie Madoff had to be doing fraudulent work, and he was mad at the SEC for their ignorance and their inaction, and I think that was a lot of the driving force for Harry Markopolos. He said that he quickly knew that Bernie Madoff had to be running a fraudulent scheme. So the first step was to gather the facts, and Markopolos did this. He said within 5 minutes he could see that Madoff was fraudulent, and spent the next few years gathering more information to back up his theory. The next step was to define the ethical issues. I don't think this was hard for Harry Markopolos. He felt that once he knew this truth, he had to expose Bernie Madoff. So the next step is to identify the affected parties. I think the primary party in this situation were the investors of Bernie Madoff, and another affected party was competitors of Bernie Madoff, which was what Harry Markopolos was. So he felt he identified these. Harry Markopolos identified these affected parties, and he had a duty to help them. And identifying the consequences, which is the next step, I don't think he had, since he didn't work for Bernie Madoff, I don't think there were a lot of consequences that could have happened to negatively affect Harry Markopolos, but he did, in realizing this as an ethical issue, he could have done nothing, but he was driven to expose Madoff. So in identifying the obligations, which is the next step, Harry Markopolos had a duty to illuminate the truth that he had found about Bernie Madoff, and he was very driven, intrinsically driven to do that. The next step is to consider your character and integrity, and Harry Markopolos has a strong character and strong integrity. Alan Marcus said that he was like a bulldog, and Harry Markopolos said of himself, it's a personality type, I guess. His personality and his ethics drove him to do the right thing in exposing Madoff. And the next step is to think creatively about the potential actions, and Harry Markopolos took a lot of different actions. He wrote to the SEC 5 times, and that was, I think, one of the really frustrating things for him, because they didn't listen to him. I think that they opened one investigation at one point, but quickly closed it, saying they couldn't find anything wrong. So over the course of a lot of years, he wrote to the SEC. He also went to the press, and they didn't listen. Harry Markopolos said of himself that he was a $50 billion failure. He was frustrated that he wasn't listened to, and it was hard for him, but he continued to do the right thing. The last step is to check your gut, and I think that Markopolos did this throughout the whole process. He knew early on, from the beginning, that Madoff needed to go to prison, and he knew that he needed to do the right thing to share the information about Madoff that he had found. So Harry Markopolos was an interesting man and a really good example of a whistleblower, and he did the right thing throughout this process.